Hi. This week, after doing a lot of digging through a lot of different lists and things like that, I decided to read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. It got rave reviews from stuff I read, co-written by a prose author and a poet, which is very clear through the story. Very basic summary, and I'll try not to spoil anything big because there are so many twists in this book, and I don't want to ruin that for anybody that's interested in reading it. I highly recommend it. But a basic summary is that two time-traveling fighters, one is named Red, who is built in a cybernetic world, and she is a compound of both organic and inorganic material and technology, and is run by the Commandant with a capital C. And then you have the second time-traveling fighter named Blue with a capital B, who is grown by the Garden, capital G, and is very organic material. Both of these figures are able to assume identities and places in history and millions of different timelines. And they are running up and down what are called braids. That's how they describe these passages in time in different universes, different worlds, and in order to succeed over their enemy, which is each other. So the Commandant and the Garden have been at war for millennia, it sounds like, from what you gather through the story. And Blue writes a letter and leaves it for Red, which starts as a taunt, and ends up becoming, but as their correspondence between each other continues over the centuries, you don't really know how long this goes on for, but it is a very long time. It becomes a deepening friendship and eventually love that encompasses incredible pain, betrayal, deep trust, and a level of affection that is hard to describe. It's more than just a romance story. It's deeper than that. So that was it is incredible. And of course, because it's still sci-fi, you still have this incredible conjunction of genres between poetry and sci-fi. It's the only way I can think of to describe it. You have these twists, and I won't give away the twist at the end. But it ends up with them being able to circumvent certain circumstances and come out victorious. And I won't go into detail over how that happens, but that's the story, is their correspondence between each other in an effort to fight for their individuality and their freedom. This could be read in one or two sittings. I didn't, only because I was so overwhelmed with the level of detail and the level of emotion that I purposefully broke it up in I think it was 4 or 5 sittings, just for me personally. So, and this won novella awards, so it's officially a novella. But so I wouldn't necessarily not say it's a novella because of that. It is incredibly immersive through the sensory details, the settings. There are countless historical backdrops, almost always framed by environmental details, nature, the birds, the individual cultures of the people that they're traveling with, depending on if you're reading from Red's perspective or from Blue's perspective. As well as just one of my favorite parts was how the letters are delivered are in incredibly varying formats, through the cracks in fresh lava, to the carvings in fruit seeds. And because of the technology that they have, they're able to communicate this way. It felt very steampunk and also very pagan. And that's not an insult. I'm pagan myself, which is, I think, part of why this story hit me so hard, is the level of immersive beauty in how they described nature and its almost independence from everything else. It's an incredible addition to both sci-fi and the poetry genre, because you can't really separate it from each other. The characters are established very early on. Red has a very laser-guided focus and necessity to ignore emotions she has that no one else does. And Blue, with her keen observation and tenderness, and also mocking reticence, which cracks me up, which is how they end up endearing themselves to each other, colliding their differences, and then end up finding their similarities between each other that end up drawing them closer into a relationship that is very beautiful. The central idea that tugs the entire novel is that of the other, with a capital O, finding that place to continue communication, to long for each other. Hunger is a huge theme in this book, and that's actually the quote that I wanted to share. It's on in this version of the book. It's on page 61. This is a part of a letter from Blue to Red, and actually, I might have that backwards. Hold on. It goes back and forth quite often. Oh, this is a letter from Red to Blue. But the hunger you describe, that blade jutting from the skin, the weathering as of a hillside often struck by storm, the hollowness, it sounds beautiful and familiar. And that was one of those lines. I took pictures of several pages so I wouldn't forget them. That was one of those lines that just deflated me. It's just so beautiful. And so that is like the theme of them trying to find this way of continuing to fight each other while still trying to keep each other safe so that they can still communicate in a world where, short of creating their own world, they won't be able to be together, which has a lot of parallels because they're both women. So the LGBTQ themes are really heavy in a good way. This was an incredible metaphor for modern day LGBTQ struggles. It was beautiful. It's self-enclosed almost to a fault. That's not a bad thing, especially with how well this was done. But there are details, and I already am planning on rereading it. There are details that are sewn from the first page that come back on the last page. It is incredibly, literally woven as the braids they describe from the very beginning. And so I want to bring all of this to my own work. What I can and learn from this. The level of detail, and the details weren't extraneous. They weren't just randomly chosen because it seemed right. It was similar to like reading one of Shakespeare's monologues, or in Hamlet specifically, when Ophelia is handing out the dead flowers to the people around her after her father is killed. Every flower has a symbol, and I knew reading this book with all these incredibly detailed descriptions that they all had meanings, and it would take months probably, and I plan on doing it, to look at how all of these are analyzed and what they all mean. And having that kind of depth is something that I want to learn. And also to learn to co-author. You cannot tell that this was written by two different people, because even the sci-fi parts, like the specifically sci-fi parts, are incredibly poetic. Like you can't tell that there's two different voices here. And so I want to be able to someday co-author with someone like that. That would be amazing. So I highly recommend this book. I will say I was choking, sobbing at one point because of how hard it hits you. It is just beautiful. Incredible prose, incredible plot. Yeah, this was a definitely good choice. So I'm glad that we could choose our own this week, and that this one came up in my search.